The Moondrop S8s. They're a more mature blessing too, but are they worth twice the price? You'll have to figure out by watching this video. Now, disclaimer before we start the review. The Moondrop S8s were provided by Michael from After Sound Review. He provided the Moondrop S8s to me and Brian just for a review unit. We're not affiliated to any store or any brand, so this review is of my own complete honest opinion. So now, TLDR of the Moondrop S8s. There are more mature blessing tools, in which I mean they have a bit more bass, they have a more relaxed treble, while retaining the same amazing technicalities, even slightly better in some regions. And yeah, so without further ado, let's just straight go into the bass of the Moondrop S8s. So the bass of the Moondrop S8s are emphasized, quite emphasized I would say even. Sub bass extension is quite amazing. Even for a full BA IEM, I did not expect this kind of bass. The bass of the Moondrop S8s feel like they are coming from a dynamic driver. They're a bit they still have this BA snap to the bass, but it doesn't bother me too much, if at all. Most of the time, I did not actually notice this. It's just that I kind of nitpicking is kind of my job. So now, texture in this sub bass is also amazing. Overall slam is also quite satisfying. It has quite enough slam. If you're a heavy bass head, I don't think that these will suit you, but if you like a more emphasized bass representation, I think this will do you just quite well, especially in terms of the mid bass. The mid bass, although they are a full BA IEM, I think they kick and punch quite hard. It's very pleasant to hear, and there is very minimal, if at all, any bloat into the mid range. There's not a lot of things I can complain about in the bass, except for that BA snap occasionally that I can notice. And so we'll just go straight into the mid range. So the mid range of the Moondrop S8s, they are, I would say, they are quite thick. They're not too thick. They're just a bit more thick than what I would consider as neutral. I think they have the notes that they are represented by the Moondrop S8 are more on the thicker side of things. It overall sounds very pleasant. Detail and separation, I think, is quite amazing. There's just not a lot of things I can complain about in the mid range. The upper mids, though, if you are quite sensitive to to more forward representations of the upper mid ranges, like female vocals and violins, I think you might want to just shy away a little bit, because the Moondrop S8s are a bit on the shoutier side of things. They are quite forward in the upper mid section. But aside from that, the lower mids and the mid mids, I have no complaints about. They are more on the thicker side, so if you do not like that, then yeah, maybe don't get the S8s. If you like more thinner representations of the vocals and such. Now, when we get into treble, which is the part that we're going to be talking about next, the treble on the Moondrop S8s are very polite. Like, they're emphasized, sure, and they extend very well, like above what I can hear. I can only hear up to like 17k. Up until 17k, I did not feel it rolling off anytime soon. And the Moondrop S8's treble, I think, is extremely polite. Sibilance is very minimal. Overall cymbals, crashes, and etc. They just sound like they're just muted a little bit. They're on the softer side. I would not say that compared to what I would hear a cymbal crash to be in real life, these are softer, and compared to something like the Blessing 2s, even these are on the softer side of things, which I kind of like, especially for longer listening sessions. Now, that does not mean that the detail is lost in the Moondrop S8s. The detail is definitely still there. Detail retrieval in the treble is still excellent. Speed and separation is also quite great. I kind of like not just kind of, I really like the treble representation of the Moondrop S8s. So yeah, and I find it quite amazing as a general IEM, regardless of price point. Now, the speed of the treble, though, although I do say that it's great, I don't think that these can do Dragon Force. I think they're not that fast. But not a lot of IEMs can anyway do Dragon Force, so yeah, but again, it's my job to nitpick, so I'm putting that there. Now, when we're talking about soundstage and imaging for me in the Moondrop S8s, if this were my head, I think the soundstage is just a little bit smaller than my head. Imaging I think is quite great. I am able to perceive sounds from a 45-ish degree accuracy, and they just do the job quite well in this regard. Stage in general with the Moondrop S8s also feels quite wide. I think I quite like the presentation of the Moondrop S8s in terms of how they present the soundstage. Not only are they wide in general, but they also, as an overall soundstage shape, they just feel more rounded, I suppose. Yeah. Now, when we're going to be talking about build quality and packaging of the Moondrop S8s, I unfortunately only got the case and some spare ear tips and some converters from Michael. So he only provided the spare ear tips that came with the Moondrop S8s, but not the box and all those things. But that's fine with me. You get a few spare ear tips with the Moondrop S8s. Not a lot of them. You only get like I think it was 4 pairs. Was it? I think it was 4 pairs. I don't remember exactly. You get this nice leather box, and I think the packaging overall is pretty similar to what you get when you buy the Moondrop Blessing 2s. So yeah, this converter does not come in the box. I just have to say it. This converter, they do not come in the purchase package. These are the DD Hi-Fi converter, which you don't get in the Moondrop S8s. Far as I know, the cable here is has been re-terminated to a 2.5 millimeter balance connector. So yeah, so that's why he provided me the converters, so that I can use them with 3.5 or single-ended outputs. Now, general build quality, I would say that they are an improvement over the Moondrop Blessing 2s, I think, and especially the shell size is comparatively a lot smaller. Like, if you had issues with the Blessing 2's like sheer size, here's them next to each other. They're significantly smaller overall. And now the Moondrop S8s, although they don't have this like metal faceplate, they have this sort of like, I think it's a metal faceplate-ish thing that is put inside of resin, so it doesn't just fall off if you just accidentally step on them or something. And far as I know, this is mostly 3D printed and just what's it called, and just polished very well. I do not see any seams or whatsoever in the shell. I'm not able to feel any of that, and it just looks really, really cool. I would say you're able to see all of you're able to see the crossover circuit and all the drivers and all those things, capacitors, resistors, and such, and it's really cool, I would say. Now, the nozzle on the S8s, unfortunately, like the Blessing 2s, are quite big. So if you have very small ear canals, these might not fit you. But if you have just normal ear canals, I think they'll just do you just fine. If anything, I've heard from some people that what they do instead is that because they are a sort of a CIM shape for smaller ears, what they started off doing is they just bought some comp-like soft wraps and just put that foam around these, and they just fit like CIMs would. Which is an interesting thing. I'm unable to do that because my ears are quite big. So yeah, the ear tips that are provided are quite supple. They have this big ass bore in them, which only really works with the Blessing 2s or the S8s. So yeah, cable overall just is the same cable that you get with the Blessing 2s. They are quite good enough. They don't have a chin slider for some reason. Don't know why, but they don't. They're not that microphonic. They do the job quite well, and they look nice. So yeah, I think Moondrop uses this cable alongside like the whole lineup. I've not seen Moondrop use any other cable except maybe some color variations of this cable on their whole lineup, except for the cheaper ones like the Moondrop SSR and the SSP have different cables than the Moondrop S8 does. Now let's just get straight into comparisons, because I think that's what we're here for mostly. With the Blessing 2s, The Blessing 2s are half the price of what the Moondrop S8 retails for. Here in Indonesia, the Moondrop S8s are going for around $700-ish. These are going for around $350-ish. So they're twice the price. They have lowered significantly since their release date, I think. As of now, I think they've gone down to around $650-ish. And these have gone down to like $300-ish. But they're still about 2x price. Right, and overall, when we go section by section, the bass of the Blessing 2s are, there's less bass in the Moondrop Blessing 2s, which is quite surprising considering that they have a dynamic drive. I did not expect this. The punch and slam of the Blessing 2s feels a bit less than what is there in the Moondrop S8s, but that is also mostly just because of the quantity that exists in the S8s. If you EQ the Blessing 2s to have more bass, they will feel quite similar. I think in terms of speed overall, I think the S8s just win a little bit, just slightly, ever so slightly over the Blessing 2s. The Blessing 2s have a more texture to them, which I kind of like. Extension, I think, is pretty much equal. Bleed into the mid-range on both of them is very minimal, if at all exists. Mid-range is thicker on the S8s. They are quite thicker than the Blessing 2s. If your main complaint with the Blessing 2s was that they just sounded a bit more thin overall in general, I think the S8s will do you for quite well. Overall mid technicalities, I think the S8 just adjusts the Blessing 2s by just a smidgen bit in terms of data retrieval and separation. Treble, the S8s are softer, so if you did not like how the Blessing 2s can sometimes sound quite aggressive, I think the S8s will do you very well. I think over in longer listening sessions, also the S8s just sound better. Like, not sound better, but you can listen to the S8s a lot longer. Now, in terms of soundstage and imaging, I think soundstage, they're pretty equal. Imaging wise, I think the S8s have better imaging. Like, the imaging on the S8s is just a bit more accurate, I would say, especially in terms of vocals. I think the vocals on the Blessing 2s just sometimes feel like they're a bit wider than they intend to be. Like, it's a bit, the image of vocals are just sometimes just a bit stretched. It is not very apparent most of the time, but I sometimes perceive that, and the S8 doesn't have that issue. Overall comfort and isolation, the S8 has better comfort, I would say, because the S8s are lighter. They have a smaller shell. They also have a what's it called? They have a non-vented design, so isolation is better on the S8s. So if you're commuting a lot and you isolation is one important point to you, then I think the S8s will do you quite well. Now, aside from that, in this price range, in this $700-ish price range, what competes with the S8, I would say, is the Andromeda, second hand, of course. Brand new, the Andromedas are twice as expensive as the Moondrop S8s. So yeah, I know that. I think the Moondrop S8's tonality overall just sounds better. They're just a lot more pleasing than the Andromedas. But overall data retrieval and separation, I think the Andromedas are just quite a bit better than the Moondrop S8s. Soundstage and imaging. Soundstage is way bigger on the Andromeda. They have this just huge air and stage that the S8 simply do not have in comparison. Imaging, I think, to me, is better on the S8 than it is on the Andromedas. Overall comfort, I actually prefer the Andromeda. Sometimes, if it's cold or too hot, I would prefer the S8s, because the Andromedas have this aluminum alloy shell, and it just, or whatever material they called it, I forgot. But when it's cold, it gets cold, and when it's hot, it gets very hot. It's made of metal, and it's kind of inconvenient sometimes when the weather is not on your side. So yeah. Also, the Andromedas have this problem with condensation. it happens to me quite a lot of times, which I did not experience with the Moondrop S8s. So yeah, it kind of gets nasty over time, the Andromedas. That's one thing that I want to point out. Aside from that, I think that's pretty much it. In my personal opinion, if you like the blessing tools, you want a more mature blessing tool, you don't mind the extra cost, get the blessing, not the blessing tool, get the S8s. Like, get the S8s, and you'll have a thicker, more forgiving signature. But if you like how the blessing tools can be aggressive, how the blessing tools feel a bit more neutral than the S8s, or in general you just like how the blessing tools already sound like, and you don't want more bass, or you don't want softer treble, then well, simply don't. I think if you're looking for a more mature, more softer, more bassy sound, then yeah, get the S8s. But I don't think necessarily that it just doesn't feel like an upgrade to me. It feels more like a side grade, which costs twice as much. So do I think that the S8s are worth it? If you do not have the blessing tools, maybe they are. If you have enough money to shell out, then maybe get the S8s. I think the S8s are a safer bet. But if you already have the blessing tools, unless you don't like the blessing tools, then there's no real reason, at least to me, to upgrade to the S8s. Like, I would suggest try them out first. Just to get to the point, I don't think that the S8s are worth twice as much as the blessing tools do. Because the blessing tools are an incredible value at the price point. So, yeah. And I think that's pretty much all from me. I think, if you like this video, comment what you think, and subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time.